And we all like, what's the name of this? Bluey. Bluey. If you don't know what Bluey is, then, well, you're missing out, all right? Because most of the families that I know, Bluey is a regular part of their media intake about life. And there's so much in there. I find that adults watch it too because there's so much, there are themes in it, like you saw here, of how important it is. And if you watch the whole episode or whatever, which I did not, you see, though, that they were all pointing toward why marriage is such an important part of their lives. And so today, the rerun that we're going to talk about, just right off the top, so you know, it's all about marriage. And you might say, oh, well, that's not me. I'm not married. Well, here's the point. Everything we learn today, though, has a lot to do with relationships, period. And so anything that you can relate to this, you can see that really marriage is meant to be a great picture of what can be. My wife and I have been married for almost 42 years. Yeah, and 5 of them have been amazing. And so, no, I'm kidding. I'm going to say a lot of stuff today. I'm just being funny, all right? I love my wife, and we have a great marriage, and I am so thankful for her and blessed, and so thankful that when, Saturday comes, and, of course, I have to be ready for today, and I spend a little bit of time on Saturday. I've usually prepped through the week, so I'm not, pressed on Saturday that much, and we had a work day here yesterday. Thank you to those who showed up to help out. You probably saw the fruit of their labor out there. They did a great job cleaning everything up and making things look good so that he could pour the rain on it. And but it was great, And when I got home, I was a little tired and kind of worn out. And I needed to go through my stuff and everything. And how many of you have ever been to the Troy Strawberry Festival? Anybody been to that? Yeah. My wife loves that Strawberry Festival, and so I got to go yesterday to the Strawberry Festival with her. And so we went in the afternoon, late afternoon, evening, and everything. It was a lot of people, and but she loved it. It was great. She had a good time, and we walked a lot. We got a lot of steps in, and so anyway, it was amazing. So, no, I got to tell you, if you ever felt like, you have a relationship with someone and you're trying to figure all the details out, trying to get to know that person, trying to understand them, trying to see because, you may at first say, wow, this person is amazing. And it's like, I really love being around them. And then all of a sudden, you really get to see them for who they are. And it's like, oh boy, this is interesting. How in the world do you keep peace at home? How do you keep peace in a marriage? And so I want you to see a couple of things. I want to establish something that needs to be, I think, said. Because a lot of times I believe that these days we have bypassed some of the things that can bring real peace in our life. And we've gone to the shortcuts around it to figure out, whether things work or not. And so I want to make sure it's understood and clear. I believe this. Here's a statement that you should know. Marriage isn't just a piece of paper. It's not meant to just be a legal piece of paper that you receive or whatever from a pastor, a minister, a clergy of some kind, or a judge, or somebody who can pay the $50 to Rolling Stone magazine. It is meant to be something that is really identified as something powerful, and it's meant to represent something that is to last. It's meant to be something that is more than just a piece of paper. It's the promise that brings peace, purpose, and permanence. One of the things that's critical and for all of us to understand is that when marriage was created by God in Genesis, matter of fact, right there at the beginning, when he put Adam and Eve together, there was a wedding ceremony. God pronounced them man and wife, gave Adam some really unique kind of advice. He told him to leave father and mother Does that make sense to you? You know? It was because that idea of leaving father and mother was meant to be a principle forever. Not just to Adam, because Adam was formed from the dust of the ground, right? That's how God created him. And so how in the world do you leave father and mother? What's that all about? And so the whole idea is that you're making a permanent home of your own. You're clinging to each other. It's meant to do that. But sometimes things don't seem to work as well. And how do we deal with those things? And how do we get them to work? And some of us in this room, we've already been down that path and seen trouble come and separation come and even divorce maybe has come, and it's been a difficult thing to deal with. And maybe you're into another relationship and you're trying to figure that one out. And there's just so many dynamics of this that in our life today and in our world today that we see people bypassing marriage altogether and trying it without the idea of permanence or the idea of commitment. And I got to tell you that it's commitment over convenience. That's how God created it. It is meant to be commitment over convenience. And so a lot of us maybe have different people, varying things. Maybe even some of us in the room, we're trying to navigate some of those decisions. My goal today is really not to point the finger at anyone. That's going to be something that you need to take up and allow God to work in your life and your heart about these things. But I can tell you that if you're looking for something that's going to be valuable in your life, it's going to bring you peace, and it's going to give you purpose in that relationship, you're going to want it to be more than just a piece of paper. You're going to want that long-term commitment over convenience. And so the rerun today, as we've been aptly shown from Bluey, that the rerun today is marriage works best when it's about what you can give and not what you can get. I think we go in expecting certain things and have expectations of what it's going to be in a relationship like that. Many times that's why people bypass marriage some, is because they want to try it out first to make sure it fits. And sometimes when you try to do that, one of the things that you find is it didn't fit. And so then you end up with the horrible breakup of things, and how do you deal with that? Or even in the situation where you've maybe been married for a period of time, and it's like, how do we keep or maintain it? How do we get to that, that point to where we feel like we're over and past the big humps and the arguments and the disagreements and the things? And I just tell you, never. Because you have two people who are different, and you have two people who have two ways of thinking. And if you find that you have someone that you are exactly alike with in a marriage, that can be a problem too. Because all the things you don't like about yourself, you see in them. And it's all kinds of reasons why that marriage, just by talking about it like this, there's many things that come to our minds, and it's like, I don't know if I can make this work. I don't know. And so for those of you in the room that you are, maybe you've been married for a long time and you hope that you get down the path and you're able to see many years of marriage under your belt. Or maybe you've already been down that path and it didn't work out so well and you're already trying again and it's like difficult. I'm not here to patch everything up today. All I'm here to do is to point you in the right direction for what God's plan is and how it can actually help you. But you got to be willing. That's the problem for a lot of us. We've got to be willing to look first at ourselves. We're not here to make the other person right, okay? So please, if you have the instinct to every once in a while do this or this, just try not to do that today. Try to keep it inside here because it really is about us, okay? Now, is everybody good? I know it's rainy outside, I know it's a little dreary, a little down, everything like that stuff, but I need you to think about this, all right? This could really be a life-altering thing for many of us. And if you're single here today and you're like wondering, will you ever be married, or is that part of God's plan for you? Well, I'm not here to tell you that being married is God's plan for everybody, because I don't believe that's true. I believe God has a purpose and a plan for all of us. And some of us, we have an opportunity to be in a marriage relationship, and some of us, it's not God's plan. Or it's not part of what would make us experience Him the most. And so I want to encourage you that all of us, the greatest thing we can do for a marriage, or whether we're married or not, is to lean into our relationship with Jesus. And if you're like exploring faith right now and you're wondering, some of you that watch online, I know that this is one of those things that you're doing. You're exploring faith. And I want to make sure that everybody understands this is critical, that if you really, really want to have good relationships, start with the one that matters most, and that's the one with Jesus. So this rerun takes us to a passage of Scripture. Many times we use the passage of Scripture from Ephesians chapter 5. But today I'm using a different one, because when we wrap up today, we're going to take the Lord's Supper together. And that's on purpose. Because if you want anything that's going to bring unity to your marriage or to your life or your relationship with Jesus, it's to have Him search you and to really remember what He's done for us. And so we're going to do that together at the end. Let me take you to Colossians chapter 3, where the Apostle Paul gives us some teaching about what it means in our relationships and how it should work. And immediately, we're going to go right to these verses. And then we're going to go back and see what the verses really were prior to this. In verses 18 and 19, it says this, and every woman in the room is like, oh no. I'm sorry, ladies. I'm not writing, I didn't come up with this one myself. And I can tell you, I don't want to be thinking, I don't want any of you to be thinking that my idea here is to point it all out and tell you what you've got to do and all this stuff. This is between you and God and between you and the other people in your life. It says first, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. And then it says, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. I like these verses. Sometimes I like these more because they're a little more pointed than even in Ephesians 5. And these verses right here, they put the two words that I believe are the hardest things for us to understand. Wives, submitting. I'm going to tell you something about what I have learned about my wife. My wife is, she is the stabilizer in my life. She is the one that when I go off the rails, my wife is there to bring stability. And she does. She does that quite well. I didn't have any idea that I needed to walk 5 miles yesterday at the Strawberry Festival. But she knew that that's what I needed. Okay? By the way, I got her permission to tell these kind of jokes, all right, today. Now, the idea is that, though, when we talk about women submitting, I think one of the things that we find out is that it's the way God has created us as men and women, that one of the things about women is that they have no trouble with the emotional. That is one of the things God's gifted them with, the emotion of love and understanding it. And they may show it in different ways, but that is definitely a part of a woman's makeup, who God has changed them, or made them to be, not changed them, but made them to be. And so when it says submit, that may be the hardest thing for a woman to do. It may be the thing that's more difficult, the thing that's not easy. And husbands, why does it say husbands love? Well, because men are not usually on the emotional side that much. It's not me. We're more the get it done kind of thing, right? And so when it speaks of love, I believe that really is telling us that's the thing we don't do very well. And it's the thing that is hard for us. And so these things, we're going to need help outside of ourselves to accomplish either one of these things. And so I thought to myself, I need to make sure we understand what these things really mean. For a woman, you can hear this, and maybe you've gone to church at some point, somewhere, sometime in your past, and you've heard, or you've been watching online or TikToks or whatever you do. And the idea is you hear submit, and they give you what it is, and it sounds like it's this basically, everything except being called slavery, and that's not at all what this is talking about. And you see this thing where men are berated because they don't love properly, and you see some of that teaching that it's so difficult. Well, I want to give you some practicals of what this does and doesn't look like, what it really is. And before we get there, I just want to say this. Marriage works best, remember, when it's about what you can give and not what you can get. All right? And that's for all of us. All right? That's for anybody. That's husbands and wives. Any relationship, actually, any friendship, any relationship within God's church, in the church of Jesus, it's better what we give than what we get. Okay? So hear that. That's critical. So let's just pick them apart one at a time. The submission part. Let's talk about that. So what biblical submission isn't. All right? This is what it isn't. It is not meaning, it doesn't mean that wives submit to all men. You ever heard that? Oh, it says women need to submit to men. No, it says wives submit to your husband. It doesn't say that women are inferior. Matter of fact, we get into that in just a minute. But the idea here is that it's not a blanket statement about women and their relationship to men. All right? Here's where I believe that culture has taken it a long way out of the way and down a rabbit trail where women feel like they've got to be empowered more than what they are. And it's because, I'll just be honest, I believe men have taken advantage of things and principles that maybe have come from God's Word. Maybe it's made up in their own tradition or their own family or their idea of what it should look like. But I can tell you this, that wives do not, it's not spoken here that now a wife has to submit to every man in the world. All right, that's not what it's talking about. And then the next one would be, it doesn't mean that wives stay in abusive situations. Hear me? If you're in an abusive situation, ladies, where a man is abusing you verbally to the point of distress to where you cannot live your life, or it is at a point to where physical abuse has come in, or manipulation of any kind, financially, physically, if any way where you feel that that's is, you have no obligation whatsoever to stay in an abusive situation. Matter of fact, stepping away from it may be the thing that brings about change in a spiritual way to your husband's life. Okay? So that's a critical one right there. All right? Wives, this is not, biblical submission does not mean you have to stay in an abusive situation. Okay? And then, it doesn't mean wives go along with sin. Hey, honey, I think we should knock off a convenience store tonight. Okay? And it may not be that, but it may be, you know what? I think we're going to fudge a little on our taxes this year. Or I think we're going to, you know what? I think it would be better if we just lied to everybody about our situation or circumstance. That way they'll know. Hey, I tell you what, we don't need to go over to their house tonight. Let's just tell them we're sick. Okay? I'm not telling you that you can't figure out ways, but it's much better to be honest about situations than it is to go along with sin. So ladies, I want to tell you, and let's just be honest, men. We have a tendency to want to take over and not do certain things, and so it's better just to cover it up, and we pull our wives along with us sometimes, and that's not right, nor is it fair. It also doesn't mean this, that husbands ignore or overpower their wives. In other words, this is how we're doing it. This is where we're going on vacation. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're spending that money. This is what the house will look like. This is what the color will be. This is the couch I want. You get the point? It can be a lot of other things. Our kids will do this. Our kids will not do this kind of thing without anything there. And when your wife has something to say, it's not ignoring. Biblical submission does not mean that she has to just do everything there. And it doesn't mean that husbands make decisions without input. It doesn't mean, men, that your wife or being told in this thing to submit does not mean that you should just make all the decisions and not include her in what goes on. She needs to be a part of that. And I like the last one's pretty important. It doesn't mean women are less valuable or less capable. Matter of fact, if it weren't for women, where would we be in the church today? And I got to tell you something. Who did Jesus select to be the first one to show himself after he was resurrected? It wasn't the 12 disciples. It wasn't Peter or John. No. It was a woman. It was Mary. Mary Magdalene. She was the one who saw him first. And she was the one who come rushing. And of course, what did the men do? What, you're crazy, right? That's why. Okay? The men wouldn't have known what to do with the information. The woman processed it and thought it through on all the angles and knew exactly. I mean, imagine that. That's an amazing statement. What does it mean, though? What it does mean is this. It means that submission is about mutual respect, love, and teamwork in marriage. Each person valuing the other, listening well, and putting one another first. I can tell you this, that one of the things, you can see my wife didn't proofread my writing. Okay. It comes down to this, though. It's these three things. Say them with me. Mutual respect, say them with me. Love, and teamwork makes the dream work. That's right. It's got to be a situation where it's about what we give than what we get. Okay? Those kind of times when we make those if we make those decisions on our own and we don't allow them to be in the situation, or we don't allow their input into it, or we don't bring them in spiritually and let them and pray together about it, I can tell you the most intimate you can be with your wife, men, is to literally lead her and pray with her. I know my wife's heart by what she prays. And I know what she's thinking when I hear her pray. That's critical, all right? It's critical. So if you're looking for something like that, and you might say, well, God's not been much of a part of our relationship. Well, let me just stop over here and say, duh, all right? If you're wanting your relationship to be strong, then I would say maybe invite him in and allow him to be part of that. But then on the other side of this, if you've been trying that and you can't find the ways to figure it out, listen, there is no devotional book or marriage guide or anything better than just following what God's Word has to say about loving other people. You'll get it right if you follow those principles. So we go to this and we say, all right, now we've talked about submission and what it is and what it isn't. It's meant to be mutual respect, love, and teamwork. That's really what it looks like. So I want to tell you, this is critical. Men, if you want your wives to follow that kind of thing and be the team player with you like she is supposed to be, and not having to do her side of life all on her own and trying to figure out things and keeping the house maybe the way she is looking for it to be. And hear me, I know some men that are much better at keeping house than women are. That's not the point. It's not traditional roles or things that have got to be a part of this. Because honestly, we get ourselves in these places where we are letting these traditions and influencers and all of that tell us what it needs to look like. And I think if we just stopped a minute and stepped back and said, what does biblical submission look like? We will find out that it has to do a lot with the two of us working together and submitting to each other and the needs that are there. Giving, not getting. Now, what does biblical love look like? What is it like in a marriage? What's it supposed to look like? So men, here is the thing. So ladies, you're off the hook now, all right? I'm not talking about you. I actually am talking about all of us the whole time, okay? But the idea is this. It means caring just as much about your wife's well-being as your own. All right? That's what biblical love looks like. Matter of fact, it is also caring just as much about your wife's rest as your own sleep. Okay? Do I have to explain these things? You ever seen just exhaustion in your wife's eyes? You ever seen it? That's the saddest look in a woman's eyes, is when she has that, I'm just tired. I don't know what to do. I've been doing this all day. I've been doing this all day. I'm exhausted. If we just gave her time for a nap, wow, that might be amazing. Okay? But it's also caring just as much about your wife's health when she's sick as your own when you're sick. I don't know if you're like me. I had a cold last week, almost died. Right? I didn't have a cold. I stretched the truth here a little bit, okay? But have you ever seen, you've seen the things online where men, they get a little cold and it's like, oh, and a woman's like, what's wrong with you, honey? Are you okay? Yeah, I just had a baby. Well, can you fix dinner? It's ridiculous sometimes how we make fun of these things. But I do think that this is critical. It's critical. And you need to be a student, men, of your wife so that you know how to love her in this regard. Because she may have health issues that maybe she doesn't even share with you completely, or she doesn't even tell you when she's going through it because of maybe the way we've cared about it. So we have to be careful. And then caring just as much about your wife's burnout as your own stress. Okay? Don't downplay what they're going through, maybe because they're not in the same work environment or situation. Okay? Just remember that. It means caring just as much about your wife's needs as much as your wants. And it means you're caring just as much about your wife's concerns even more than your personal upgrades. You know what I'm talking about, personal upgrades, right? Well, I want this car, I want this computer, I want this whatever, And it could be easy for us to want that new fishing rod far beyond we would want to take care of something that your wife is concerned about, like maybe the fact that the light in the kitchen doesn't come on anymore. Okay? You'd think I'd been there, right? All right. I'll tell you what biblical love is. It's about showing up with unconditional care, concern, and commitment. And when should you do that? What's it say? Every day. The idea is unconditional care means that you don't set up conditions to when you're willing to care for the person, and you show concern, true concern. Okay? I'm going to tell you this. You've got to get rid of your phone, all right? I see couples go in for dinner, a nice dinner, in restaurants, and what do? They whip out their phones, and the first thing they do is go to that, okay? Now, my wife, I don't know whether she believed me or not, but I left my phone in the car the other night when we went out to dinner. Did it on purpose. I wasn't going to do it because I knew what I was going to be saying to you guys, and I thought, I got to make sure I don't do this. You know what she did? She was the one driving. I let her drive. Real men let their wives drive, okay? And so I let her drive. And she parked the car. I went in and got the table. I went in and sat down, and I left my phone in the car, and she brought it to me. And I was like, I was leaving it in the car on purpose. Oh. Well, let me have it. And then she took my phone, and put it aside. It was good. It was a good thing. It was positive. It's showing that I have concern enough to listen and have a conversation and talk with her and not let something else distract me. And commitment. Commitment means that if I'm going to biblically love my wife, I'm going to do everything I can to not let her think or see or even there be a remote thing in my life. I got to tell you something. It's time to unfollow, unfriend all these people that you knew in your past, high school sweethearts, people that I just want to see what they're doing and how they are. Nope, 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 nope. Cut that out of your life, okay? All of those things all they're going to do is set you up for when it doesn't go well, for then you to turn to them and say, so how are you doing? This goes for everybody, okay? It's not just husbands, okay? It's time for us to cut that kind of stuff out. Time for us to make real commitment in our relationship. That means there's nobody else, okay? There is nobody else like my wife, and I don't want anyone else to occupy the space in my life that she occupies. Okay, that's fidelity, that's faithfulness. That's what the commitment looks like. That's biblical love. And it should be something, I don't know if you've noticed, but all of these could go for either one, right? So the idea isn't that men don't need to submit in their relationship or be open to that kind of thing. It's just men don't do it as well. You know, men have respect. There's no problem with men respecting and doing that, submitting to people like their bosses or whoever. Okay? And women, you know, the harder thing for them is to do that. It's harder. You got to build respect and build trust with a woman. And so it's necessary to love them fully and accept them and commit yourself to them. And when you do this, the balance of doing both, loving and submitting on both parts as husband and wife, that's when God can use it. And I know what a lot of you are thinking right now. Oh, but you know, right now we're just kind of all wrapped up in our children's lives. Everything is about our children right now. You know, I'm running them here and running them there. Let me just say, okay? If you're asking the question, what about our kids? You know, I mean, my husband right now, I mean, I don't need to be, if you've got 2 kids, you're saying, I don't need to be raising 3 kids. You're right. You're absolutely right. You shouldn't be. But your focus shouldn't be totally just your kids. I mean, yeah, they got to eat, and yes, please make sure they're clothed. Make sure they go to school, okay? All those things are important. Make sure they're educated, all those things, okay? But hear me. If you want your kids to be successful and you want your kids to make it and make commitment to Christ, and you want your kids to be living lives that are like balanced and it just all falls together and at peace in their lives, the greatest chance you have for that, no guarantee, because they will make their own decisions. But the greatest guarantee you can do is this one. The greatest gift you give your children is a strong marriage. Okay? It's not the way you educate them, okay? Public, private, Christian, homeschool, you know, put them outside for the wolves to raise, whatever, okay? Sorry, I got distracted there a minute. But the greatest gift you give your children is a strong marriage, giving everything you've got in that marriage relationship. I can tell you something. I know, and I can say this, I've done this right and I've not done it right at times, and I can tell you that it's so important that you make your marriage at the center of the relationship. Because if you're submitting and loving the way you should in the relationship, then what's going to happen is that it's all going to come together in a way that it shows your family what's most important. You're showing a picture of what it is to have a relationship with Christ, what it is to know Jesus and follow Him, when you are making that relationship between the two of you the strongest and most important thing. And when kids, and they will, when kids try to pit you against each other, or they try to do everything they can to take your attention, and your attention really should be on your marriage at the time, I can tell you this, all right? You're not sending them a message that tells them what their marriage in the future should look like. So make sure you're doing everything you can. This is what's important. You know why I know this? Because the verses before we get to the wives submit and husbands love and not be harsh, all this, the things that are stated there, I see verses that are just overarching to any and all relationships. It's overarching to everything in our family, everything in our church, everything in our community, anybody we come in contact with. These should be verses that for someone who's a follower of Jesus, if that's what you're really wanting to be, you really want to be a follower of Jesus, not just somebody who likes the teachings or thinks he was a good guy or even believes that he died and maybe even rose again. But you really want to follow him, meaning that you're going to do his teaching. Anything that he said, I'm going to follow his principles and his life. If you want your marriage to work, you want your family to work, all of that, then this has to be the principles that you see. It begins back here in these verses in Colossians 3, beginning in verse 12. And I'm just going to read through these. I'm going to highlight a couple of things, but it speaks for itself. Therefore, as God's chosen people, those that God has assembled as his followers, holy and dearly loved. That tells you about how he feels about us. Then he says, clothe yourselves with, and I want you to read these words with me, compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Say them with me again. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness. Do you think if you were to clothe yourself every day, I mean like on purpose, decide to do it, it was almost like you're putting on articles of clothing and you're putting this on and you put on compassion. How do you think that would be different in the way that you treated your spouse? In kindness, how would that be different if you started treating your spouse with kindness? What if you were to put on humility? And you might say, I do that every day. Liar. Liars. Okay? Because if you say you got humility, you blew it, all right? And so compassion, kindness, humility, that means putting others first. And that's your motivation. I'm going to put somebody first. I'm going to put my wife, my husband first. When we do that, it's amazing the difference. Gentleness, refusing to raise your voice. Refusing. I will not yell at my husband. I will not get to that pitch where every bit of the crystal we got at our wedding shatters in the cabinet. Gentleness, I will not speak to my wife the way that it would make me mad if I heard someone else speak to her that way. Why is that? Guys, why do we feel like we can yell at her like she is somebody we have just had a fist fight with and stuff? Why is it we can do that? And then if somebody else did it, we'd be offended and want to punch our lights out. And patience, meaning I don't care what's going on. Patience hangs in there. And then look what happens. You end up bearing with each other and forgiving one another. And if any of you has a grievance against someone, make sure you're making it right. Don't let this be something that carries on. Grudges should never happen in a marriage. If you want there to be a marriage that's strong and that it's going on Christ's principles, then there shouldn't be any grudges. There should always be openness. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. That's the principle. And overall, these virtues put on what? Say the word. Love. Love is the most important one. That's for everybody. That's just not for the husbands. It's for everybody. Love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. This is good language for the church to learn and for us to know. But then look what it says. It says, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. We're meant to have peaceful lives. We're meant to live peaceful lives, not because the world's peaceful, not because the circumstances around us are peaceful, but because we know Jesus who can bring peace. And this idea of rule is like he becomes the peace referee, okay, in every situation, and he brings peace to it. If we were to stop the arguments we're wanting to have with people, especially our spouses, if we were to stop those arguments for just a second to say, whoa, 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 let's let the referee rule, and let it be Jesus telling us whether or not this is peaceful or not. And then just be thankful when you get it. Be thankful for things when it's just peaceful. Be thankful for that. And this is what we have to do. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms and hymns and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. And then this one's the best one. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of who? The Lord Jesus. The one that is our leader, Jesus. Leader, Jesus, Lord, Jesus. Giving thanks to God the Father through him. This is how it all comes together. So now if I were to put rerun number 5 up here again, and just wanting you to play this over and over again like you do Bluey episodes, and you were to remember it, marriage works best when it's about what you can give, not what you get. It's about giving, not getting. The more we do this, okay, and don't say, boy, I hope she's listening, or I hope he's listening. No. I needed to hear this, and I need to make sure that I'm giving more than I'm getting. And trust me, I just say this. You think your needs won't be met? If you both do this together and commit to do it faithfully, allowing Jesus to rule in your hearts and lives, you may see parts and dynamics of your marriage that you've never seen before. I want to say this. One of the reasons why Jesus came in the first place was so that we would be able to actually have a close relationship with him. And in doing that, that's why he established this idea for the church to over and over again rerun this idea of taking communion together or the Lord's Supper together. And it gives us an opportunity with the people around us that we make things right with them. So in just a minute, we're going to have some quiet time, and we're going to be passing the elements. So we can begin to do that right now, passing those elements out to everyone. And as you're passing those elements, you're receiving that, a little piece of bread, a little wedge of bread, and a little cup of juice. And go ahead and open the cup and get it ready. And this is meant to be a reminder. So I'm going to tell you, we went through a process yesterday. We went through a process with the worship team beforehand where we did this together. But here's what we said. It's time to search, allow God to search you. And allow him to be the one that is like opening up things in your life. And the things that are there that you know that you have done yourself or held a grudge about that someone else has done, that it's time now to say, you know, God, you need to break me now. Break my pride, break my pushback, break me to a point to where I need you to do this work in my life. And I want to tell you something. If you take this today, you take it with the idea that if there's someone in your life that God brings to your mind, that you will then be able to say, okay, I'm going to make sure I make this right with them. So in these next few minutes, while these pieces are still being passed to you and you're still receiving them and getting them, I'm going to ask you to just, right where you are, have a quiet moment and ask the Lord to search you. Ask God to search you in your heart. So quietly, you just bow your heads, have a little quiet time right there with the Lord. And as you're doing that, it gives you an opportunity to then be able to see the things maybe God brings to your mind and your heart, and ask Him to break them and remove them. Get rid of those things. So quietly, right where you are. I want to say this too. As you're speaking with the Lord about these things, maybe in your own heart you realize, I don't even know for sure whether or not Jesus is really in my life. And this might be an opportunity for you to reach out to Him and say, in this moment, before I would consume any of this, because this is really meant to be for people who are believers in Jesus. And maybe in this moment, you become a solid believer in Jesus. And you give your heart and life to Him. Decide to turn away from the way you've lived and turn and go His way. That's called repentance. And then admit the fact that without Him, you're hopeless because of your sin. And then receive Him into your life because He died and rose again. If you can believe those things in your heart, the Bible says you're saved. So maybe now is that time. What a beginning to your marriage and your relationship, what that could be. Jesus took the bread and He broke it and He said, this is my body given for you. Do this and eat this to remember me. It's a symbol of that. So let's remember Him together right now. And He took the cup the same way. He said, this is my blood that was shed, will be shed for you. And it's a new covenant. It's a new promise of my grace, mercy in your life. And by shedding His blood, He brought about the forgiveness of sin if we just reach out to Him and believe it. So let's remember that together right now.